Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. The title today says it all. It is going to be cold and stormy over the next several weeks for the lower 48, but we do have some hurricane season stuff to talk about, as we always do in this weekly update that I produce for you in the off-season. We got the off-season logo going, and there's a lot to talk about, despite the fact that today is generally a quiet weather day. We're kind of in between events. We just had a couple of pretty impactful winter storms, including one that I was just in about a week ago now up in the Northeast. I'm going to show you some of the results of that work. And then we had another quick-hitting winter storm this weekend, and now we're kind of in between, and we're getting ready to usher in. I don't think anybody's looking forward to it. Sometimes you usher something in, and it's exciting. Like at a wedding, people get ushered in to sit at an exciting wedding, right? But this is nothing like that. This is going to be very cold air, and we're not looking forward to ushering that in. Or maybe you get ushered in to go to your favorite sports event or concert or movie. You get the idea. This is going to be cold air. But first, let's talk about some tropics stuff to get things started. A little bit of a change now from last week and the last few weeks. This area right here in the eastern Pacific starting to cool off again. We're losing these positive anomalies that had popped up. Those are now starting to wane away, as I thought that they would. And I based that thinking on evidence by looking at the different modeling that was out there, suggesting that the easterlies, the trade winds down here, would resume in a pretty stout fashion and get the treadmill sort of working again, the conveyor belt of pushing the water westward from east to west, as pressures are generally lower way over here in the western Pacific than they are here in the eastern Pacific. And so the net flow of air is from high pressure to low pressure, and that pattern remains in place. The La Nina is holding strong, and there's not much change overall, except that it's starting to cool down again in this region. In the meantime, the same old song and dance. The main development region generally warmer than it should be, especially here in the far eastern and southeastern Atlantic. Incredible warmth compared to average up in the northwest Atlantic, and then pretty much everything in between, with the exception of this one area off of North America between Bermuda and the east coast of the U.S. and a few patches in the Gulf of Mexico. Most of the Atlantic is above the long-term average, and that doesn't look to change anytime soon. And within just a few weeks, like I said before, and I'm serious about this, it's not just saying something just to hear myself say it, but in 4 weeks, it'll practically be March, right? I think it will be March. You know, February only has 28 days this year, so in less than 4 weeks, it'll be March. And then at that point, we only have 90 days till the hurricane season. So in 4 weeks, it'll be 90 days until we might have a hurricane somewhere. And then sometimes, you can get them in May. We've seen that, tropical storms in May. No hurricanes in May, thank goodness, threatening the U.S., to my knowledge. But that's how fast things are moving. Time's moving. I mean, you know that. A lot of us might still be sitting around waiting for things to open. I get that, but I'm telling you, these next 90 days are going to go by quickly, because the month of February is going to be a wild ride, and that makes the time go by fast when things are sort of exciting, right? And it'll be here before you know it, the hurricane season. So this stuff's going to start to matter more and more as we go forward. Quick look at the Southern Oscillation Index. It took a little bit of a hit, but it's starting to rebound again. Look at that number for today at 28.44. Let's change this color to yellow so it's not quite as threatening. But yeah, it took a little bit of a dive, but the overall numbers are coming back up again. This is indicative of those easterlies, basically building back strong easterly winds across the tropical Pacific, keeping the La Nina in place. We can see that on the animation here as well for the subsurface, and it just stopped, but that's fine. You get the idea. This ended on February 2nd. This is always about a week or so behind, but when we get the next one, and this updates again, for next week, I'll show it to you, and maybe it'll animate for me. We're going to lose this right here. This was the anomalies in the subsurface of the eastern Pacific up to about this time a week ago. All right, remember that? So when we see this next week, you'll see that these have basically shrunk away. And then it's really making some headway over here, these cold anomalies towards the western Pacific. I mean, look, We're talking almost, what is that, between 160 and 140 east longitude, way, way out into the western Pacific here. The warm pool is suppressed all the way over into the western Pacific, far reaches of the western Pacific. No signs of this advancing eastward at all. That is not there, so we'll just put a big X. And all in all, it's pointing towards at least cool neutral conditions, maybe weak La Nina conditions for the hurricane season. We'll take a look at some of the charts and graphs that are forecasting that once we get to March, because again, we'll be about 90 days away at that point. Right now, some of those forecasts, they're just not as reliable as looking out the window, for example, and you can look at the anomaly map, you can look at the subsurface, the SOI. These are the clues that tell us, yeah, you're in La Nina, and it's not changing anytime soon. This is remarkable, especially with what's coming up with this amazing cold snap that is about to hit the lower 48. These are actual sea surface temperatures in degrees Celsius for the Gulf, and right here is the 26 Celsius line, and it extends up into the east central Gulf of Mexico there, and there's a little island of 26 Celsius here, and look, there's 27 degrees latitude. And so this pocket right through here is generally warmer than average. Everything else around it is at or just a little bit below average, generally speaking. So what does this mean? Well, it's going to be interesting when we get this really cold air that's going to be coming down across this region and how it interacts with this much above normal water temperature profile. Might get some interesting storms that come across because you have a high temperature contrast between the warm, moist Gulf over here, especially, anomalously so, it's more so than it should be, and the very, very cold anomaly-laden air. Is that the right way to say it? Anomaly-laden? Maybe not, but the air is going to be abnormally cold, put it that way. It's coming, and it'll be an interesting battleground across this area to see if something gets going. Maybe it helps to fuel a pretty potent storm. We'll have to just wait and see. Also, I talked about this recently, and it's really interesting to me. I don't know if you know oceanography and sea surface temperature profiles and what we call gradients. This is really, fascinating because the gradient, the difference between this cold water up here, it's cold, but it's warmer than it should be. I showed you that on the anomalies map. And the warmer water of the subtropical Atlantic, the gradient is just not that much because you only got like 3 of these isotherms, 3 or 4 isotherms in there. They're not all packed together, meaning that, especially in this case, this water profile up here, the temperature profile, it's not cold relative to average. If we can go back to the anomalies map and let's zoom in on this, this is the area that I'm talking about, right through here. And some of those anomalies, all the way up to the coast of Massachusetts, off the coast of Nova Scotia, the Gulf of Maine, and then down into the Atlantic itself, off of the Canadian Maritimes, we're talking 4, 5, 6 degrees Celsius above the long-term average. And so it's no wonder that when we look at the actual temperatures here, that there's not that much of a contrast. This delineating line through here is just not that pronounced because the water temperatures are not spread across the profile. What am I trying to say here? A gradient is the difference between something over either time or distance and whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. Colors can have a gradient. In this case, the temperature gradient is not very substantial because the water in the Northwest Atlantic is so warm relative to average. Now, 7, 6, 5 degrees Celsius is not that warm if you go jump into it. I understand that, but it should be a lot colder than we're seeing. So it's just neat to me to see. I mean, I guess it's also kind of alarming because there's got to be a reason behind it. But even down along the coast here, near where I live, the Carolinas, the gradient a little bit steeper right here, mainly because of the Gulf Stream running pretty warm in the low 70s there, upper 60s, low 70s, and some cold longshore current coming along down this side on the western part, the western wall of the Gulf Stream met by these cold water temperatures. So the gradient is a little bit more pronounced there, but elsewhere, that's just remarkable. Sorry, I get in my, it's just showing you how interesting this is to me. And hopefully it is to you as well. And it also has ramifications because that warmer water, relative to average, helps to fuel these storms. More moisture is available, and maybe, just maybe, that's why we're seeing these higher snowfall totals overall with these storm systems. We're not getting the blockbuster low pressure areas, but we're getting higher snow totals. Something to study for another day. Just thought I'd throw that out there. All right, so let's move on to lower 48 weather. And generally, it's a quiet weather day compared to what we have seen. This is the departing storm system right here, now affecting parts of Newfoundland after passing Nova Scotia, and that after passing the Northeast up here. Actually, the low moved up the coast. Similar to the storm that I was in a week ago, but not quite as intense. And it was faster moving. It's more progressive. It's getting on out of here, as opposed to the one last week that kind of got stuck in these waters off the coast of New England because of blocking high pressure up over Greenland. We don't have that this week, and so this storm system's moving on a little quicker. A couple of other things you can notice: the Rockies with very, very healthy snowpack. The mountains here in Utah, what is that, the Wasatch Range? There's the Sierra Nevada, and lots of snowpack there. Good to see. By the way, that's White Sands, New Mexico, just so you know. Not snowpack, but that's actually very bright, reflective, high albedo, as we call it, sand. And then the trades, nice and strong, not abnormally so, I don't think. At least nothing is showing up. Certainly not anything disrupting sea surface temperatures down this way. But a good, healthy trade wind blowing through the Caribbean. Not any convection to speak of down that way either. All right, so let's take a look at the National Watch Warning Map. A few winter weather advisories in this purple area. This is for wind chill because, oh my goodness, the freezer has been opened and it's going to be nasty. I'll show you this in just a moment. But really no major storms over the next several days. But that doesn't matter because the cold that is coming is going to be major enough. I got these mixed up. So let's go to this one. Don't show you this very often. This is the 2-meter temperature from the GFS 12Z run. So 2 meters, we know our metrics, right? 2 meters is about 6 feet. All right, so most people that I know are between 5 and 7 feet. I know a couple of 7-footers, but that's those are athletes. But you understand, so most people 5'5", 6'3", that's a decent average for human beings. I'm just figuring, right? So that's what 2 meters is. The ground, where we live, where we stand, that's 2 meters. So these are the temperatures forecast by the GFS, the Global Forecast System. We're going to go out and look at about a week ahead. And this is stunning. I mean, it is. It's like, wow, look out. And so the way this is set up on Tropical Tidbits, you have these various grid points with different numbers. And so as we start out, this is valid basically right now as I'm putting this together, 18Z on Monday, February 8th, when I'm putting this together, and just a few select areas to show you. In the 60s and 80s down here, depending on where you are in Florida, right? Looks like about an 84 down there in southwest Florida. There's a 62 there in eastern Texas. There's a 2 in Nebraska, and a minus 24 up here in southern Canada. No, thank you. I like cold and stormy, and it's exciting when you get winter storms, but that is too cold. But watch what happens. We kind of put this into motion, and watch as this cold air spills down into the lower 48, and we go out. We're now 3 days out. Very, very cold up on the border states, Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Negative double-digit lows. Yuck. So this is Thursday morning. Let's go out to Friday morning. We're talking about minus 30 up there in parts of Minnesota. And this is remarkable, if this is correct, minus 5 over here in parts of Missouri. And then you're getting into the 20s. There's the freezing line right there. And so this is valid 96 hours out, so 4 days. Let's go to day 5. Unbelievable. I mean, look at that. We're talking about minus 20s, minus 33, minus 34 in Minnesota. And so the interesting thing is this is coming down really across the nation's midsection, And even though some of this air is trying to spill over on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains here, it's focused more along the nation's midsection, right down the high plains and the Great Plains, aimed eventually towards day 6 here, Texas. Yes, look at those numbers. If this comes to fruition, wow, -7 Fahrenheit. And that's I've had to look and check myself. These are in degrees Fahrenheit. -7, -13 here in Kansas, and then 1 degree near Dallas-Fort Worth, -5 over to the west of there, -14 near Amarillo. Really? I sure hope not. And then down here towards Houston, Galveston, hard to see these numbers, but it looks like the teens for lows, 15 degrees here in parts of Louisiana. You get the idea. -1 in Arkansas, 2 degrees in northern Mississippi. Ugh. All right, let's just go out one more day. This is a week out. At 168 hours out, this looks like the worst of it in terms of the expanse. So you have below zero up here in parts of the Great Lakes states and the Ohio Valley. Single digits, not too far. That's near Austin. -1 here west of Dallas. And again, it looks like, oh, so I see they didn't paint a temperature in there. My eyes deceive me. It's Galveston Bay. It's not a temperature. I thought it said 11. Man, I got to get some glasses or get a bigger monitor. But anyway, it's going to be cold. Very, very cold. And this is the stuff, as I chuckle away at it, it's actually very serious because it's going to impact a lot of people and a lot of infrastructure and livestock. I mean, this is the kind of cold we haven't seen in a long time. I have to go check. I'm sure someone's going to talk about it. But this would be record-setting cold for the nation's midsection, at least in southeast Florida, and even my neck of the woods of southeast North Carolina. We generally escape the worst of it. And it's just the way that the jet stream is dipping down here. Had it been more focused this way, then we'd be talking about a much more cold pattern for the eastern part of the United States. As it is, it's going to be cold enough. But this stuff in the nation's midsection, all the way down to parts of the central Gulf Coast, yuck, and very dangerous for sure. So let's move the weather map itself. The other is temperature. This is more of your sensible weather, storms and so forth. Quiet today. Fast-moving systems go across New England. A little bit more snow, but nothing heavy. Maybe an icing event for parts of the Ohio Valley coming up here by mid to late week. Got to keep an eye on that. So make sure you're following your local trusted sources. Seriously, we're talking about Kentucky, Missouri, southern Illinois, Indiana, Ohio maybe. So, ice. I'd rather have snow than ice. I think we can all agree with that. And then the cold air drains down, and maybe we're out at about 5 days out, just maybe with that Arctic front, the polar front really, some wintry precip possible, especially if we get any kind of storminess that tries to ride the southern stream. We get the jet stream, the polar jet coming down like this, and then the southern stream of energy coming up through this way, kind of goes like this. We're trying to draw some streamlines in here. And if these two can combine, yes, we're going to see snow and ice for areas that aren't used to it. This is just something to watch for. And, it's kind of comical to see frozen precip over the same waters that produced Category 4 Hurricane Laura last August. That's very strange to see. But this shows you the nature of this cold snap coming up. 1049 millibar high pressure at the surface in western Nebraska, and cold air is very dense, and it'll be outlined about like that, and the storm systems will ride along that boundary. So if the boundary is more to the east, we can see more areas in the southeast United States get in on the action. But the bottom line, I'm very serious here, the cold air is going to be problematic, huge problems with it, across the board, from energy needs, transportation, and just people having to deal with it, livestock, infrastructure. I talked about that, but also the potential, once the cold air is in place, and the magnitude of it, that we could see the setup for a major winter storm. Looking at the actual observational, the operational model, sorry, I got ahead of myself, don't worry about the operational models. You know, looking at a deterministic run of one run of the GFS. Let's start looking at the ensembles. It's kind of like hurricane season when we see a favorable setup overall, and then we wait and see if a hurricane comes along to take advantage of it. This is that. A very favorable pattern with cold air in place, deep cold air at that, and the potential for some significant storminess with that pattern as we go out over the next 7 days. That's day 6. This is day 7. Again, looking at these deterministic one run of the model kind of thing, not helpful, but you get the idea. You see that big storm that tries to pop up. You bet this kind of temperature contrast, the very cold air coming out from the poles, the North Pole in this case, of course, and then the warm, moisture-laden energy source of the Gulf and the Western Atlantic. Absolutely, we have the potential for a potential blockbuster storm coming up. I know I said potential twice, but sorry. All right, let's move along. You can tell it gets me like excited, but it's not the excited like we're going to Disney World excited. It's more, like look out. This could be pretty serious. All right, changing gears a little bit, switching gears as they say. HurricaneTrack Insider, that's our site that we have set up for our patrons that support what we do, take them on the inside of our project. So I was going to just show you the latest projects, what we've been working on, as the slide implies. Look, that's the snow that we saw up in Middletown, New York. I didn't dare touch it because it just looked too perfect. You know, nature creates these interesting sculptures. But in estimating it from, that's a garbage can there, by the way, it looked like it was about 18 inches high. And it just kind of built up there right outside the hotel that I was staying in while covering that winter storm. They had anywhere from 14 to 30 inches, depending on where you were in those bands up there in the Northeast. You know how that works. There's my colleague Mike setting up one of the camera systems. Actually, we were taking it down. This is when we were finished. But this is what I wanted to show you. So these camera systems, we use these during hurricanes, of course, and they provide a live feed. And those have been really, really helpful over the years. And as of late, we just started doing this recently thanks to the crowdfunding that we have received from our hundreds of patrons from around the world. We began integrating live weather data into these systems using a Kestrel Drop 3 sensor. It's a little tear-shaped blue device that measures everything except the wind, basically. And you leave that on the outside, and you can just barely see it right there. It's hooked onto the ratchet strap hook. So it stays on the outside, and over Bluetooth, it sends its information at whatever interval you set it to. And in this case, we've set it to 1 minute. And inside the camera case is a Raspberry Pi computer, and of course our hotspot from Verizon that helps to stream the video. And the result is we get to send data. So we set these cameras up all along the area. Some of these are from some of our users and our supporters. These 4 right here were from the efforts from Mike and myself. We set up 4 live cams ourselves. This one in Long Island is from one of our supporters. This is from Brady, another supporter of ours up in Grafton, Massachusetts. And it was a successful event. The data that gets transmitted, we did have one bug in the system, and I'm going to point it out when something goes wrong. The world is not perfect. We had a bug with the way the program that resides on the Raspberry Pi interpreted the temperatures, and it was reporting 1210 degrees. Luckily for all, that was a bug, and bugs, of course, with code can be removed and exterminated and fixed, and we will have that fixed soon. Everything else worked really well, the pressure sensor, and this is the most important part for hurricane season, I think. Wouldn't you agree? The relative humidity was working fine, but then your dew point and heat index and other things are going to get skewed because the temperature was messed up to begin with, so garbage in, garbage out, but we'll have all of this rectified. This is what the data looks like. This live feed at the time, you get to watch the video live, and then underneath it, the weather data updates, all from these maps that I was showing you there. This is the other one, just to give you an example. And again, these temperatures were erroneous. We will fix that. But the bottom line here is this is extremely exciting because we've got 4 of these now. And we're getting ready, starting on March 1st, to launch an additional crowdfunding campaign to acquire 20 more of these Raspberry Pi computers. We'll talk about it later, but I'm just letting you know what's coming. And we're going to have all of this ready so that all 20 of our live camera systems will have at least the sensible weather that you can feel. And then 3 of the systems will have wind data from the RM Young wind anemometers that we use. Those are very expensive. The Kestrels are about $130 each, and that provides us everything from temperature, pressure, humidity, dew point, that kind of thing for $130 a pop. But the RM Young anemometers are $1,600 each and a lot harder to set up. These we can put anywhere we want. The camera systems and the little blue drop sensor, I mean, we can scatter those over an area on any kind of a light pole, the balcony of someone's house if they allow us. You know, lots of different opportunities for the temperature, pressure, and dew point. But wind is a lot harder to capture, and so that requires a lot more work, and it's more expensive, and so forth and so on. But we are going to have 3 wind sensors going forward. And then the idea is, as I wrap things up, try to get me out of there, that yes, I will be on the lookout for the potential of a major winter storm. I still want something up here in eastern Massachusetts. This is my favorite area. When you get these bomb cyclones passing offshore like that, and you get the blizzard conditions over here with those northeast winds along the Cape, and then up here towards Scituate. I still want one of those before the end of the season, but if we don't get that, so be it. We will then be focusing on, and this is less than 90 days away. We're only talking about 60 days away for this. My plan is to have about a week where we go out to Tornado Alley with all of this equipment, all 20 cameras, every one of them paired up with a Kestrel, what we call a connected Kestrel. Thank you, Pete, for that slogan, is what we call it. Pete's one of our supporters. He knows what we're talking about. We take all these units and the weather stations, the actual anemometers, and our weather balloon, Herbie, to do some testing during a multi-day outbreak in the Great Plains. I think it would be incredible. We go out, we put these units all around here, and we'll just try to fill them in. You know, imagine this was like a big tornado watch, and we just have the whole area peppered with cameras. I don't know if that's 20 or not. Got to be close. We can do that, and we're going to do that, and that's what we're doing with this whole Patreon HurricaneTrack Insider thing. This will be the big test that we get ready for the hurricane season, using this to help us get ready, and then we'll be all set as we get to June 1st and the 2021 hurricane season. So if you want to be a part of it, get on board, patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. The link is in the description of the video. That, my friends, is the power of crowdfunding. All right? All right. Well, as always, it's great to have you on the other side of whatever device you're watching from, listening to me. Hope you learned something, and I hope you're ready, seriously, for that cold. The stormy will come later, I do believe, but the cold is coming. Take that very seriously, especially if you're in the nation's midsection, all the way down in perhaps the Gulf Coast, you know, Texas, upper coast of Texas, maybe even, again, those areas where Laura impacted. Very, very cold weather coming. You know who to follow in that area to stay on top of it. Make sure you do so. Be aware, be prepared, all that good stuff. All right? In the meantime, between now and then, have a great rest of your Monday. And again, thanks for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. We'll reconvene and do this again next week.